A mother is sharing a warning tonight after her daughter was allegedly assaulted. The York-Pocosin Sheriff's Office says it happened on Showalter Road in Yorktown.
The girl is shaken up and her parents are spreading the word in hopes of finding the suspect. Chanu Her has more.
The victim in this case is only 7 years old. Her mother says her daughter went out to grab the mail, a daily routine, but seconds later she came back inside scared and told her mother a man drove by and grabbed her hair. Tonight her parents want to find this suspect and also warn other parents.
Never had an issue. I teach her all the time how to go out there, where to stand. She has it down put because that is a busy road.
Right on their busy road, Kristen Yakalavich's 7-year-old daughter was targeted while doing what she normally does, helping grab the mail.
Maybe 45 seconds passed and she was running back to the front door, not crying, nothing, just her face is just froze and she's holding her head like this. She said, "Mommy, some man just grabbed me and pulled my hair."
Kristen says a man drove right up to her daughter and assaulted her.
It was definitely a man, Mama. Yeah, he had to be right up on her.
The girl clenched onto the mailbox as her hair was being pulled, which Kristen thinks was a big part of how she was able to break away safely.
She did exactly what she was told, which goes to show you, as much trust you put in your children, it's the other people in this world that you cannot trust.
She called the York-Pocosin Sheriff's Office after talking with her daughter. Deputies are now investigating and have beefed up patrols around Showalter Road.
As many times as you just keep thinking about it, you think it gets easier and you calm down about it, but you get more and more upset because you think, what really could have happened to her?
And Kristen's family hopes other people become more aware after this incident.
We need to be more focused in the present. Get off your phones, get up off that couch, get outside with your children. Something as simple as the everyday routine can turn into something so tragic.
All right now officials are investigating this as an assault. The suspect, as deputies describe, is a black man with curly hair. If you have any information, you're asked to call the York-Pocosin Sheriff's Office. Chanu Her, 13 News Now.
A Hampton man pleads guilty to leading a family-run heroin drug ring. 67-year-old William Joe, a.k.a. Pops, is accused of leading a large-scale heroin trafficking conspiracy. U.S. attorneys say Joe trafficked heroin from New York and New Jersey and then sold it in Hampton Roads. Joe apparently employed several family members in his operation. He faces up to 20 years in prison when sentenced in September. Tonight, there's an arrest in the murder of an Army soldier in Newport News. U.S. Marshals took 21-year-old Shannon Hodges into custody today in Honolulu, Hawaii. As we told you last week, she is charged with second-degree murder in the death of her husband, 19-year-old Danzel Labesh. He was shot to death last year, but it took police more than 1 year to identify his wife as the suspect. No word on when Hodges will be extradited to face those charges.
Tonight, the search continues in Virginia Beach for a recent college graduate. We're told no family members or friends have seen 22-year-old Denise Martin since yesterday morning. Martin recently moved back in with her father and younger brother in the Red Mill area after graduating from Longwood University. Her college roommate says all of Denise's belongings are still at home, including her phone, car, ID, and debit cards.
For her to go missing like this is very strange. At first it was nothing but disbelief, and now it's just, I have a mission, and it's to bring Denise home.
Family and friends have posted pictures on social media, and they have also organized a search party. If you have seen Denise, call police right away. Governor Ralph Northam is expected to sign the Ashanti Alert bill this Friday. The measure is named for Ashanti Billy, a 19-year-old college student who was killed after being abducted from JEB Little Creek 4th Story. The new law will create an alert system for missing adults who are too old for an Amber Alert, yet too young for a Silver Alert. Congressman Scott Taylor is also working on a bill on the national level.
President Trump is keeping a hard stance on his immigration policy, even after announcing an executive order to keep migrant families together. The president's executive order states that the administration will maintain family unity, including by detaining alien families together. But tonight, the president said they will still be tough along the border, and there are still many questions about how and when children will be reunited with their parents. ABC's Janae Norman has the latest developments.
President Trump rallying his base in Minnesota, firm in his stance on immigration.
Democrats don't care about the impact of uncontrolled migration.
Earlier today, with the stroke of a pen, doing exactly what he said he couldn't do.
We're signing an executive order. We're going to keep the families together.
A complete 180 from just 5 days before.
Now, wait, you can't do it through an executive order.
Contradicting the administration's previous insistence.
Congress alone can fix it.
The president signing the executive order, making changes to his own zero-tolerance immigration policy 75 days after the crackdown began, facing bipartisan backlash over the sounds and images of migrant children in cages and news of babies held in facilities called tender-age shelters.
If you're really, really pathetically weak, the country's going to be overrun with millions of people. And if you're strong, then you don't have any heart.
The executive order ending the policy of separating migrant families at the border, but the zero-tolerance policy of arresting illegal immigrants seeking asylum continues. Janae Norman, ABC News, Washington.
The children separated from their parents at the border may be detained at facilities across the country. Others end up in foster care. A Christian group in Michigan says their foster parents get about 24 hours notice, sometimes even less, that a child needs their care. The call usually comes from a Border Patrol agent or member of ICE. Workers with Bethany Christian say they may not get information about where the parents are being detained. They just hope to return the children to their parents before the parents are deported.
Our foster parents are loving, caring people, but it takes time to prove to a child that this is a safe place to be.
The group says they have spent weeks trying to track down family members of 81 children who are staying in their foster homes. The spokeswoman for the group says there is currently no organized system to ensure that children get back to their parents.
Tonight, the FBI is warning about an increase in sexual assaults on airplanes. The FBI says the assaults and unwanted touching incidents primarily happen to travelers sitting in a middle or window seat. The victims are usually sleeping and covered by a blanket or jacket. The FBI also says more incidents are reported on flights that are longer than 3 hours. A person who is convicted of a sexual assault aboard a plane can be sentenced to life in prison. More disturbing details are coming out about the California couple accused of starving and torturing their children, 13 of them. The couple was in court again today. Prosecutors say their 11-year-old daughter was so malnourished, her arm was the size of an infant's. Reporter Rob McMillan has more on the horrific details.
David and Louise Turpin sat still during their preliminary hearing, listening to the chilling 911 call made by their 17-year-old daughter. She's the one authorities say escaped through the front window of this Paris home where 13 children allegedly lived in filth. The 911 dispatcher first asked, "Do you know where you live?" The girl answered, "I think in Paris, California." It took the 17-year-old nearly 5 minutes just to give the address of the home. At first, she would only give the zip code and 4-digit suffix. And at one point, she even misspelled her own last name. But she would later go on to say, "My parents are abusive, they abuse us, and my 2 little sisters right now are chained up. They woke up at night and started crying. I wanted to call you all so you can help my sisters." The dispatcher asked whether the children went to school. The girl said no. When asked if they were homeschooled, she said, "A fake school is set up. I haven't finished 1st grade and I'm 17. The dispatcher then asked when she last took a bath. The answer, about a year ago. According to investigators, the girl said her parents would hit her, pull her hair, and even choke her. During one of those punishments, Louise Turpin asked the girl if she wanted to die, and that when she did, she would go to hell. As far as eating, the children were allegedly only allowed sandwiches, burritos, and chips, and they would eat in the kitchen one at a time, standing up at the counter, then returning to their rooms. An investigator also testified that the 17-year-old girl was sexually abused. One time, David Turpin pulled her pants down and sat her on his lap. then warning her that she better not tell anybody what happened. But he also testified that never did the girl say whether he made her pull her underwear down, nor did she say whether she was inappropriately touched.
None of the children are expected to take the stand. The couple has pleaded not guilty to child abuse, torture, and other charges. Both remain in jail on $2 million bail. If convicted, they could get life sentences.